The Academy station hung above New Terra like a silent observer, watching the colony grow below. Inside the metal halls and training rooms, young humans from 100 different settlements learned beside the Virati, an alien species that had conquered half the galaxy. The Virati were tall, strong, and believed they had all the answers about how to make young people tough. The instructors at the Academy did not question them. They never did. Marcus walked down the corridor with his left eye swollen shut. His lip was split in 2 places, and his ribs hurt when he breathed. He was 14 years old. He should have been thinking about his studies or his friends, but instead he thought only about pain. The marks on his body told the story of the last training session. The Virati boys had hit him repeatedly while the instructors watched from the side of the room, writing things down on their tablets. They had done nothing to stop it. His sister Linda found him sitting alone in the library, staring at nothing. She was 16 and did not have bruises like her brother. She had learned to be invisible, to avoid the big Virati students, to keep her head down and mouth shut. But she was not like Marcus. She did not accept things easily. She sat down across from him and looked at his face. Her jaw tightened. She said nothing for a long time, but her eyes were moving, thinking, calculating. Marcus knew that look. Linda got that look when something needed to be fixed. Marcus asked her why she was staring. Linda told him that the instructors had no right to let this happen. She asked him why he did not report it to someone. Marcus laughed, even though it hurt his ribs. He said he had reported it 3 times. The lead instructor, a Virati named Tora, had told him that strength came from hardship. The Academy was preparing humans to survive in a hostile galaxy. Pain was a teacher. Linda's hands made tight fists. She asked Marcus how many other students had been hurt. Marcus told her that many had been. Kevin was smaller than everyone else and got beaten in almost every session. Sarah had stopped coming to the training halls because she was tired of having her face pushed into the ground. Even some of the older students were taking different classes just to avoid the Virati bullies. The Academy was calling it adaptive training. Everyone else called it something different. For the next hour, Linda asked Marcus question after question. How many bullies were there? 3 main ones, he said. Did they follow the same schedule every day? Yes, almost exactly. What moves did they use? They relied on their size and speed, and the fact that no one could stop them. They did not need to be smart about it. Did the instructors ever actually stop them, or did they always watch? They always watched. They always took notes. Linda left the library without saying anything else. Marcus watched her go. He knew his sister, and he knew that she was thinking about something. He hoped it would not get her hurt. He hoped she would not do anything crazy. But hope was a soft word, and hope had never helped anyone in the training halls. Over the next 3 days, Linda moved through the Academy in a way that no one noticed. She went to the archives and looked at videos of human martial arts. Earth had been a harsh world billions of years ago, before humans had left their planet and spread across the stars. On Earth, humans had learned how to fight with their whole bodies, using intelligence instead of just strength. The video showed techniques that did not rely on size. They showed how speed and precision and knowing where to hit could matter more than raw power. She watched the Virati bullies. She sat in the training halls and observed how they moved, where they were strongest, and where they might be weak. One of them had a slight limp in his left leg. Another one did not move his left shoulder as much as his right. The third one always dropped his guard slightly when he was confident. Linda recorded everything in her mind. She did not write anything down. She did not tell anyone what she was doing. She simply watched and learned and began to understand that the bullies were not invincible. They were just bigger. They were just used to having no one push back. She started to train alone in the empty sections of the Academy. She practiced the movements she had learned from the videos. She did not have strong muscles like the Verratti did, but she had something else. She had precision. She had speed. She had patience. She practiced until her hands hurt and her legs burned. She practiced until the movements became automatic, until she could do them without thinking. Other human students noticed Linda training. At first they said nothing. Then one girl asked if she could join. Linda said yes. A boy asked what she was doing. She told him the truth. She was learning how to fight back. He asked if she thought it would help. Linda said she did not know, but she was not going to find out by doing nothing. Word spread slowly through the human students. More came to watch. Some of them asked to learn. Linda taught them the basics. She taught them what she had learned from the videos and from watching the Bullies. Some of the students said it was useless. The Verratti were too strong. Linda told them strength was just one thing. There were other things that mattered more. 1 week after she started training, Linda was walking through the main corridor when she saw Kevin being pushed against a wall by one of the Verratti bullies. The student's name was Vior, and he was enjoying the power of it. He was enjoying making Kevin afraid. He was enjoying the fact that the instructors were not intervening. Linda kept walking. She did not stop. But she knew that something was about to change. She could feel it the way you feel a storm coming. The sky changes color. The wind shifts. Something in the air tells you that things will not stay the same. That night, an announcement came from the academy. There would be performance evaluations the next day in the main training hall. All human and Verratti students were required to participate. The evaluations would test strength, speed, and problem-solving under stress. The instructors wanted to see which students were truly developing. Linda did not sleep that night. She stood at the window of her quarters and looked down at the colony on New Terra below. Lights moved in the darkness. People were building things. People were trying to survive. And here in the academy, young humans were being told that suffering was the path to becoming stronger. She thought about Marcus and his swollen eye. She thought about Kevin and Sarah and all the others. She thought about the instructors who watched and did nothing. And she made a decision. Tomorrow, everything would change. Not because she was strong. Not because she was brave. But because she had decided that some things could not be accepted anymore. The morning came cold and clear. Linda put on her training clothes and walked toward the main training hall. Other students were already arriving. The Verratti bullies were there, talking loudly, confident. They had no idea what was coming. No one did. The main training hall was a large open space with a floor made of material that absorbed impact. The walls were high and white, with observation windows at the top where instructors could watch without being on the ground. Rows of students lined the edges, waiting for the evaluations to begin. The Verratti bullies stood together near the center, their bodies relaxed. Their expressions bored. Kevin was called first. He was 14 years old and smaller than most of the human students. His hands shook as he walked into the center of the hall. The instructors sat at a table with their tablets. Tora, the lead instructor, looked at Kevin for a moment and then said something to the other teachers. They all looked down at their notes. Then Tora spoke. Kevin would be tested on his ability to withstand pressure. 3 Verratti students would be brought in to engage with him in controlled contact. The goal was to see how he would respond to stress and physical challenge. The session would continue until the instructors believed they had enough data. Kevin nodded, even though he clearly understood what was about to happen. This was not a real test. This was a beating, and everyone knew it. The 3 bullies walked into the center of the hall. Their names were Viomkax and Ven. They were all larger than Kevin. They were all faster than Kevin. They had done this many times before. Vio cracked his neck and moved forward first. Kevin backed away, his hands up to protect his face. Cax came from the side. Kevin tried to move away, but had nowhere to go. Ven blocked him from behind. The first punch came from VOR and connected hard with Kevin's stomach. Kevin went down to his knees, coughing. The Varady students did not stop. They could not stop. The rules were clear, and the instructors were watching and taking notes. Kevin tried to get up. Ven pushed him back down. VOR kicked him in the chest. Cax was laughing. The human students watching from the side said nothing. They had learned not to say anything. Speaking meant you might be next. That was when the rear doors of the training hall opened. Linda walked in alone. She did not run. She did not hesitate. She simply walked forward with her shoulders back and her eyes focused on the three bullies. Every human student in the hall watched her. Every Varady student watched her. The instructors looked up from their tablets. Tora stood and called out. She told Linda that she could not interrupt a test. Linda did not stop walking. She said nothing. She just kept moving toward the bullies. Kevin's eyes went wide. He understood what was happening. His sister was walking towards certain injury. There was no way she could win this. VOR saw Linda approaching and actually laughed. He told her that she should leave before she got hurt. Linda did not speak. She had learned that words were waste. Action was the only language that the bullies understood. She moved to the left of VOR, toward his weaker side. VOR tried to grab her. Linda ducked under his arm and struck him hard on the side of his knee. She had learned from the videos that the knee was a structural joint. It was made to move in specific ways. Push it the wrong way, and it caused pain. VOR's leg buckled. He fell to the ground, surprised and hurt. Kax turned toward Linda and moved fast. He had speed that humans could not match. But Linda was not trying to match his speed. She was trying to use his speed against him. When Cax lunged, Linda sidestepped and pushed him forward hard. Cax's momentum carried him past her, and he crashed into the wall. The impact knocked the breath from his lungs. Ven was smarter than the other two. He did not rush. He moved slowly and carefully, trying to box Linda in. But Linda had studied him for hours. She knew that his left shoulder did not move as well as his right. It meant he could not reach as far on his left side. It meant there was a gap in his defense. She circled to his left and struck him hard in the ribs, where his arm could not protect him. Ven grunted with pain and tried to turn, but Linda was already moving. She struck the same spot twice more, each time using her full body weight to put force behind the punches. Ven dropped to one knee. All three bullies were down. It had taken less than 1 minute. Linda was breathing hard, but she was still standing. Her left arm hurt where Cax had almost grabbed her. A small cut on her forehead was bleeding. But she was alive and awake and standing, while 3 Varady students lay on the ground around her. The training hall had gone completely silent. Every human student was staring at her. Every Varady student was staring at her. The instructors were staring at her. Tora stood slowly. She began to walk toward Linda, and for a moment, Linda thought it was over. She had challenged the order of things. She would be punished. She would be expelled or worse. Tora walked up to Linda and looked at her carefully. She examined Linda's hands. She looked at the way the 3 bullies had fallen. She looked back at Linda's face. Then, without speaking, Tora nodded. The signal meant permission to continue. It meant the test was complete. It meant something had shifted in the hierarchy of the academy. Kevin scrambled to his feet and moved away from the bullies. He looked at Linda with an expression that was not quite relief and not quite gratitude. It was closer to revelation. He was seeing something that he had not believed was possible. A human had stood against the bullies and won. The other human students began to whisper. Some of them started moving closer to get a better look at Linda. the variety students were silent, uncertain about what they had just witnessed. Linda stood in the center of the training hall and felt the weight of their attention on her. Vor was trying to get up, but his knee was still not working right. Cax was coughing, his chest heaving. Ven was holding his ribs. They had been hurt, but they would recover. The real damage was not physical. It was the fact that a human had shown them something they had not believed was possible. It was the fact that strength was not just about size. Tora spoke to the other instructors. She said something in the variety language that Linda could not understand. The other instructors looked at Linda, and one of them said something in response. Then Tora turned back to Linda and spoke in the common language that all the students used. She said that the evaluation was complete. Kevin could leave. The other tests would continue, and Linda would report to the advanced training room after the evaluations were finished. Linda nodded. She walked out of the center of the hall and back toward the sides where the other human students stood. As she passed Kevin, he reached out and touched her arm. He said nothing, but his eyes said everything. She had done what no one else had been willing to do. She had stopped the bullies. The human students began to move differently after that moment. They stood taller. Their eyes were brighter. Something had changed inside them, something that 100 words from a counselor could never have changed. They had seen that it was possible to push back. They had seen that the bullies were not invincible, and the bullies had learned something too. They had learned that there were humans who would not accept what they had accepted. They had learned that size was not everything. They had learned that the world they had known was not as solid as they had thought. The hours after Linda's confrontation with the bullies were strange and tense. Students who normally kept their heads down began to talk openly in the corridors. The story of what had happened in the training hall spread faster than any official announcement. A human girl had defeated 3 variety students. A human girl had stopped something that the instructors had allowed to continue for months. The instructors themselves were quiet. They gathered in their office spaces and spoke in low voices. Tora did not say much to anyone. She moved through the academy with an expression that made it clear she was thinking about something important. The other instructors watched her carefully, waiting to see what she would do. Linda sat in the advanced training room as instructed. It was a small space with equipment designed for individual training. The walls were covered with screens that could display data about body movement and physical performance. Tora arrived alone, without the other instructors. She did not sit down. She stood looking at Linda for a long time without speaking. Then she asked Linda to explain what she had done. How had she defeated opponents who were physically superior? Where had she learned those techniques? Why had she chosen to intervene? Linda answered simply. She had watched the bullies. She had studied human martial arts from Earth's history. She had learned that intelligence and preparation could matter more than size. She had intervened because leaving Kevin to be hurt would have been a choice to accept something that did not need to be accepted. Tora was quiet for a long time after that. Finally, she spoke. She said that the variety had believed humans were fragile creatures that needed protection. She said that this belief had led to patterns of thinking that were not productive. She said that what Linda had done was not just physical. It was philosophical. It had challenged assumptions that had stood for generations. Linda asked if she was in trouble. Tora said no. She said that Linda would be given an internship in the advanced training program. She said that humans had perspective on problem solving that the variety did not have. She said that this was valuable. Word of Teshara's decision spread through the academy immediately. Linda had not been punished. She had been rewarded. The 3 bullies, meanwhile, found themselves suddenly isolated. Instructors who had previously stood aside and watched now began to enforce rules that had always existed on paper, but never in practice. The bullies could not gather together without being told to disperse. They could not engage in the tolerance protocol sessions anymore because those sessions had been quietly cancelled. Vior's knee was injured, badly enough that he had to go to medical. Cax's ribs were bruised and painful. Ven's breathing was difficult for days. They had been hurt, and more than that, they had been humiliated. They had been beaten by someone everyone had considered weak. Other human students began to change visibly. Marcus stopped hiding his face. He started going back to the regular training sessions, but now other students went with him. They moved in groups. They carried themselves differently. Sarah returned to the training halls. Kevin asked Linda to teach him the techniques she had used. Linda agreed. She started teaching other human students in the same way that instructors taught classes. She showed them the videos from Earth. She showed them the principles of leverage and balance, and how to identify weak points in an opponent's defense. She told them that they did not need to be as strong as the Verati to be effective. They needed to be smarter. They needed to be willing to prepare instead of accepting defeat. The Verati students began to treat the human students differently. Some of it was fear. Some of it was respect. But all of it represented a change in the way the academy functioned. The automatic hierarchy that had existed before was broken. Humans were no longer at the bottom. They were unpredictable. They were willing to fight back. 5 days after the training hall incident, the Academy administration made a formal announcement. The tolerance protocol was being terminated. New guidelines would be established that emphasized technique over physical strength. All students would be trained in multiple forms of combat and problem solving. Species would not be a factor in determining curriculum or advancement. The announcement was read by the Academy director, who was Verati but not an instructor. She said that the previous approach had been based on limited thinking. She said that the galaxy was too complex for the strong to simply dominate the weak. She said that her species had much to learn from humans, and humans had much to offer the galaxy. After the announcement, more changes came quickly. Students who had stopped coming to meals started returning. The infirmary saw fewer injured humans. The counseling service found that human students were suddenly willing to talk about their experiences and what they had been going through. Marcus came to Linda one night and simply said thank you. He did not say much more than that. He did not need to. His face showed no bruises for the first time in months. His eyes had light in them again. He was healing, not just physically, but in ways that had nothing to do with medical treatment. The 3 bullies, Var, Cax, and Ven, responded to the changes in different ways. Ven seemed to accept the new order. He found other Verati students to study with and quietly moved away from his position as a bully. Cax challenged Linda directly about what she had done, demanding a second confrontation. Linda agreed to it, and the fight lasted even less time than the first one. After that, Cax also withdrew. Vor was different. He refused to accept what had happened. He continued to make problems for human students whenever he could, pushing them in corridors, blocking their paths to classes. But he never confronted Linda again. He never challenged the new rules directly. He simply simmered with anger and resentment. The academy became a different place. It was not perfect. There were still tensions between species. There were still students who did not get along. But the fundamental system of accepted bullying was gone. The assumption that humans could be pushed around without consequence was broken. Tora called Linda to her office 2 weeks after the initial confrontation. She told Linda that reports had come in from other academy stations. Humans in Verati there were asking what had happened on Station New Terra. The story was spreading. Young humans in other places were demanding to learn the techniques that Linda had used. Verati instructors in other places were being questioned about why they had allowed bullying to continue. Tora said that one human girl had changed the entire Philosophy of the Academy. She said that Linda had shown that revolution did not need to be violent. It only needed to be clear. It only needed to show that something different was possible. Linda said that she had only done what needed to be done. Tora said that there were many people who saw what needed to be done and did nothing anyway. She said that Linda was different. She said the galaxy would hear more from Linda before she was done. But Linda was only thinking about tomorrow's training session and the human students who wanted to learn. She was thinking about Kevin's confidence growing each day. She was thinking about the way Marcus had started to smile again. These things mattered more to her than stories spreading across the Academy stations. These things were real. 3 months after the confrontation in the training hall, the Academy had become unrecognizable. Human students did not shuffle through the corridors anymore with their eyes down. They walked with their heads up, and their voices were heard in the common spaces. Some of them were still nervous. Some of them had been hurt too deeply to recover quickly. But the framework had changed. The expectation of suffering had been replaced with the possibility of resistance. Linda had started a formal training program for human students who wanted to learn the techniques she had developed. 20 students attended the first class. 50 attended the second. By the 4th week, nearly 100 human students from the Academy were joining her sessions. Some of them wanted to learn how to fight. Others wanted to learn how to stand up straight without feeling like their ribs were about to break. The classes took place in the open training halls in the early morning before the regular sessions began. Linda taught slowly and clearly, breaking down each movement into simple parts. She explained the why behind each technique. She told students that they were not trying to become variety fighters. They were trying to become human fighters, using their own strengths instead of copying someone else's. She told them that speed and precision and intelligence were weapons too. Kevin became her assistant. He was only 14, but he had learned faster than any other student. He helped Linda teach the newer students, showing them the movements he had learned. His confidence had transformed him from a quiet victim into someone who stood in front of a room and gave instructions. He had found something in himself that he had not known was there. Sarah also started teaching. She was older and had more life experience. She taught the students who had been hurt worst by the bullying. She taught them that healing was not about forgetting what had happened. It was about taking what had happened and turning it into something useful. She had been pushed to the ground 100 times. Now she was teaching other people not to stay down. Marcus began to study with the advanced technical students. His physical healing had happened quickly, but his confidence had taken longer. Seeing his sister transform something impossible into something real had changed him. He started to believe that he could change things too. He started to believe that the way things were was not the way things had to be. Reports of what was happening at the Academy spread to other colonies and other stations. Some of the reports were accurate. Some of them grew into stories much larger than what had actually happened. There were stories of a human girl who had single-handedly defeated an entire group of variety warriors. There were stories of humans learning secret fighting techniques from Earth that could overcome any opponent. There were stories of a revolution on the Academy station. A delegation came from one of the other Academy stations to observe the training classes. They were both human and variety administrators and instructors. They wanted to understand what was happening. They wanted to know if what they had heard was real or if it was just rumors. Thora arranged for Linda to give a demonstration. Linda did not want to fight just to show off. She had never been interested in proving anything to anyone. But Tora explained that it was important for the other stations to see what humans were capable of. It was important for them to understand that the old system of accepting bullying and harm had no justification. The demonstration took place in the main training hall. The visiting delegation sat in the observation area. Human and variety students from the Academy filled the rest of the space. Linda faced 4 variety students who volunteered to participate in a controlled exercise. These were not bullies. They were respectful students who wanted to understand what Linda was doing. The exercise lasted 7 minutes. Linda showed how leverage could overcome size. She showed how speed could be more valuable than strength. She showed how understanding an opponent's movements could predict what they would do before they did it. By the end of the demonstration, 2 of the variety students were on the ground, and Linda had only taken minor damage. But it was not just about the fighting. Linda also explained what she was doing at each moment. She stopped and showed the delegation how the human body could be used as a tool. She showed them the principles that could be applied to any conflict. She made it clear that this was not about creating better warriors. It was about creating people who would not accept harm without responding. The visiting delegation was impressed and disturbed at the same time. They had come expecting to see something impossible. Instead, they had seen something simple and clear. They had seen that preparation and intelligence mattered. They had seen that the variety assumptions about human weakness might be wrong. One of the visiting instructors was a human named Davis. He asked Linda what she wanted to happen next. Linda said she wanted other academy stations to know that they did not have to accept the old system. She said she wanted human students everywhere to know that they had options. She said she wanted the variety to understand that partnership could be more valuable than dominance. Davis said that he would bring her methods back to his station. He said that he would teach other instructors what he had learned. He said that within 6 months, every academy station would be changing the way it approached training. He said Linda had started something that could not be stopped. 2 weeks later, the Council of Academies issued a new directive. All stations were required to review their training protocols. All stations were required to implement systems that emphasize technique over physical dominance. All stations were required to ensure that students from different species received equal treatment, and opportunity. The change was not universal. Some older instructors resisted. Some variety students who had benefited from the old system did not want it to change. But the new rules were clear, and they were enforced. The old way of accepting harm was being replaced with the possibility of standing up. Marcus came to Linda one afternoon and told her that he wanted to be an instructor. He said that he wanted to teach young humans how to be strong in ways that mattered. He said that he had learned something from watching his sister, and now he wanted to pass it on to others. Linda told him that he would be good at it. She told him that the best teachers were people who had been hurt and had learned how to heal. Kevin asked if he could continue his training even though he was still young. Linda said yes. She said that age did not matter. What mattered was the willingness to learn and to keep going even when things were hard. Kevin was not afraid anymore. He had seen what was possible, and he wanted to reach it. The academy continued to transform through the months that followed. The instructors who had allowed the bullying to continue were not punished, but they were no longer in positions of power. New instructors were brought in who believed in developing human potential instead of suppressing it. New equipment was brought in that could teach techniques without requiring students to be physically dominated, human. Students from other colonies began to request transfers to station. New Terra academies specifically to study with Linda. Variety students from other species also came, wanting to understand what was happening. The academy became a place where the universe is different. Species could learn from each other instead of competing for dominance. And at the center of it all was Linda, who had never wanted to be important or famous. She had just wanted to stop the bullies. She had just wanted to show that it was possible. Everything else had followed from that simple decision to stand up and refuse to accept what others had accepted. 1 year after Linda stopped the 3 bullies in the training hall, the academy station was a different world. The old training protocols had been completely removed from the system. The rooms that had been used for tolerance protocol sessions were converted into workshops, where students of all species could learn techniques that required precision instead of dominance. The new training system emphasized three things: technique, strategy, and respect. Students were taught to understand their own bodies and the bodies of others. They were taught to solve problems using intelligence before using force. They were taught that strength meant the ability to protect others, not the ability to hurt them. Tora had become the director of the entire academy system. She had been moved from her position as an instructor to a position of power where she could enforce the new standards across all stations. The first thing she did was require all instructors to attend training in the new methods. The second thing she did was remove instructors who refused to change. The third thing she was to bring in human experts to teach alongside variety experts. Linda became the youngest official instructor in the academy's history. She was only 17 years old, but she had the knowledge and the experience that no one else had. She understood what humans could do. She understood how to teach humans who had been taught their whole lives that they were weak. She understood how to help people believe in themselves again. Marcus became an instructor as well. He taught combat strategy to students who wanted to understand how to think under pressure. His classes were popular because he had been a victim. He had been hurt. He understood what fear felt like. But he had also learned that fear did not have to control you. Kevin moved faster through the academy than most students. By the time he was 16, he was assisting in the instruction of advanced classes. He had become the living proof that it was possible to go from being a bullying victim to being a confident, capable person. Other students looked at Kevin and believed that they could change too. Sarah trained the students who had experienced the worst trauma. She did not teach them just techniques. She taught them how to reclaim their sense of safety. She taught them that what had happened to them was not their fault. She taught them that they were not broken. They were just wounded, and wounds could heal. Vor, the oldest of the three bullies, eventually left the academy. He could not accept the changes. He could not accept that humans were no longer beneath him in the social order. He left to pursue a different career elsewhere in the galaxy. He became a warning story for young variety students about what happened when you refuse to evolve your thinking. Cax and Ven stayed at the academy, but they were no longer bullies. Cax became a technical specialist who worked with the equipment. Ven took a different path. He asked Linda to teach him her methods. He said that he wanted to understand why she had defeated him so easily. Linda taught him. Over time, Ven became someone who could respect people who were different from him. He became someone who could admire courage, even when that courage came from someone physically weaker than he was. The story of what had happened on Station Terra spread far beyond what anyone had expected. Other colonies and academy stations were not just copying the methods. They were asking deeper questions about what strength meant and how species should treat each other. On the colony world below, humans who had always thought of themselves as inferior to the variety began to stand taller. They began to organize. They began to demand better treatment in places where they worked. They began to believe that they had value that went beyond what they could produce or how much they could endure. The change came slowly, but it came. Other species that had been dominated by the variety also began to change. If humans could stand up to their bullies, then so could they. If humans could refuse to accept harm, then so could they. The ripples from Linda's decision spread outward in ways that no one had predicted. 2 years after the training hall confrontation, a representative from the Variety Leadership Council came to Station New Terra. He was an older Variety who had held his position for decades. He had come to understand what was happening on the Academy station. He had come to see what Linda had created. The representative spent 3 days observing classes. He watched humans and variety students training together. He watched Linda teach a room of mixed species students about the history of combat, techniques on Earth. He listened to Marcus explain strategy to students who hung on his every word. He saw Kevin helping a younger student who was struggling with balance. On the final day, he requested a meeting with Tora and Linda. The meeting was short. The representative said that the Verati leadership had been wrong about many things. He said that they had believed strength came only from physical power. He said that they had believed humans were inferior because humans could not match Verati strength. He said that Linda had shown them that wisdom could come from unexpected places. He said that the Verati wanted to adopt the Academy training methods across all settlements where humans and Verati lived together. He said that he wanted to establish a new program where humans could become instructors and leaders. He said that the Verati had much to learn from their human neighbors. Tora looked at Linda, and Linda saw something in the older Verati's expression that she had never seen before. She saw respect. She saw the willingness to admit that everything she had believed was incomplete. Linda spoke carefully. She said that strength was only one thing. Intelligence was another. Courage was another. Compassion was another. She said that every species had different strengths. The Verati were physically strong. Humans were adaptable and inventive. Other species had their own strengths. A galaxy that worked together would be stronger than a galaxy where one species dominated all the others. The representative nodded. He said that Linda had wisdom beyond her years. He said that this wisdom should be taught to young people across the galaxy. He said that the Academy would become a center for teaching the principles of cooperation instead of domination. Over the next 5 years, the changes Linda started spread across the entire Verati-dominated region of the galaxy. Academy stations on 100 different worlds began training students in the methods she had developed. Human instructors became common. Human leaders began to hold positions of authority. Young Verati learned to respect humans not because they had to, but because they could see the value in what humans could contribute. But the most important change was not in the structure or the policies. The most important change was in how people thought about each other. Young Verati stopped seeing humans as inferior creatures that needed to be controlled. Young humans stopped seeing themselves as helpless victims. They saw each other as partners who had different abilities and different perspectives but could work together. Linda married a human man named Robert when she was 22 years old. She had 3 children. She continued to teach at the Academy well into her adult life. She never became famous in the way that galactic heroes became famous. Her name was not on monuments or in songs, but the way she lived was her real achievement. She lived according to the principles she had taught: courage without cruelty, strength without dominance, and the belief that any person could stand up against what was wrong. The instructors who had once allowed the bullies to keep hitting learned the most important lesson of all. They learned that they had been wrong. They learned that harm was not necessary for growth. They learned that the most advanced species in the universe sometimes had the most basic things to learn about how to treat each other with respect. And on a colony world orbiting a star billions of miles from Earth, young people of different species trained together in halls that once had been places of pain. They were building something new. They were building something that would last. And it had all started because one girl decided that enough was enough, that some things could not be accepted, and that it was always worth standing up, even when standing up seemed impossible.